Hey guys, if you've been following along with this project, then thank you, and hope that you keep watching the new updates. There's going to be a few more coming up with how to clean fishing reel parts and how to get them all polished up using several different types of tools. You can attack things from a whole different variety of angles, and so from stuff like this that's just rusted together, to plastic pieces, to corrosion on some of the brass gear workings and stuff, to the resin handles and how to clean these and polish them, and also some cast metals like this block that is the level wind loop. So we'll go over all that stuff and a lot more. If you watched the last video, it was just breaking down the two side plates and the rings and the foot, the spool, which I have since taken the line off of because it was junk, and then the handle, and then the level wind assembly, and the gear worm, or the worm gear rather, and all of its different hardware. And so today we're going to be taking down the bridge assembly and the main gear, and we're going to take the main gear off of the gear sleeve, which runs all the way through here, the side bearings, the jack plate, and the pinion gear, and everything that's inside of here, as well as the other side. And then we're going to start on cleaning some of these parts up so we can go ahead and put them back together. We're also going to be taking off the level wind drive gear and the lock spring, and there's really nothing else to do with the spool other than clean it up. And so let me clear this all off and we'll get started. Okay guys, so we're going to go into this side plate here, and first I want to go over a couple of tools that we're going to need for this. First thing is a good old fashioned flathead screwdriver, and I'm also going to have a smaller size too for some of these smaller parts. We'll use a couple of picks and some tweezers, just sort of as needed. I'll put that out of frame for now. I also have this syringe, which is loaded with some 80 weight 90 gear lube, and this is just what I'm using for bearings, pins, and things that you would need gear lube for. And a couple of various, picks and just little tools that you might have for dealing with small parts. Lots of tweezers and stuff like that. So the first thing that we're going to do, we'll do the back side first, is we're going to try to, let me zoom in, and we're going to try to get the click spring. So I'll use this smaller screwdriver actually, and we'll just remove that screw for the click spring. That comes out really easily. Oops. And see if I can't get the spring to pop off of there. I'm going to use just a very fine point chisel tip to go in here and try to lift up on that that click spring. There's one side. There it is. There you have it. Set that to the side. Now we're going to remove this idler gear. We need a larger flathead for this one. Just remove that flathead screw that's in the middle of it. And just like this, for instance, I could struggle and get it out, but I could also just grab a pair of tweezers like this, stick my finger between them, grab it if it wants to come out. Doesn't appear that it does. There you go. We'll set that to the side. And now we will remove the worm bearing. So you'll need the flathead again, and I'll go right here and just unscrew this bearing. Okay, and that's it. then you'll see that the worm, which has grease on it already, has these two little pointed ends to it on either end, and one of those will slip into here and it will ride inside this bearing. And so it's important that when this reel goes back together, what we're actually going to do is inject a little bit of grease into this bearing like this. Let's see if I can get this to focus first. So this is just the syringe of grease with a small tip on it. I think it's a 20 gauge or something like that. Now I'll just push this. Well, first I need to release my lock on here, and then squeeze some grease into there, and it just fills it up from the bottom up, and you know that you're getting grease to the worm. So anyways, go back into the side plate here, and we're going to remove the side plate bearing, which is this larger cap in the center. And this is a similar concept to the worm, that the spool has small shafts on either side as well, and everything here is balanced. And they made some really good parts back in the day because some of these spools are incredibly well balanced for their age. But this end post slips into that hole in there, and when I pull it out I'll show you, and it'll be the same process for putting it back as the other bearing, just filling it with grease from the inside. Later on they made ball bearings a larger part of these reels and this category of reel, and that part really took off. These are great. I mean, they do what they got to do, but the ball bearings later on was a much better option. So again, just a little bit of grease on the inside when it goes back, and a little bit of grease on the threads. But before that, we're actually going to take this, or in all the parts like this, and clean them up really good and get the metal nice and shiny again. Okay, and lastly, we're going to remove the spare pawl from the side plate. It's just another flathead screw. And I'm curious to see if this is a spare new pawl or a spare old pawl. And it looks like it's a brand new spare pawl, which we will be installing on this reel and ordering another one to replace this spare for the next person who has this reel. And it's in very good shape. It's brand new. Somehow it's maintained its distance from the elements inside of this little cap. For the spare, I will be putting grease inside of this cap, just like I'm doing the bearings and the side plates, just to help with weather protection, because who knows how long it'll be before it, or if this will ever be used, because obviously this reel was used for a very long time with its original, which is good. But that's as far as we're going to be going with this side plate. So now I'll be cleaning up, and we're going to move on to the main guts of the reel, and that is the bridge assembly, the main gear, and all of those components. So stay tuned. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is make sure we have all the right tools to get this apart. So first thing you're going to need obviously is a flathead screwdriver again, a couple different sizes. We're going to definitely need some tweezers to move around some small parts, and we're also going to need some small picks to move things around, and hopefully we won't need anything more serious than that. Later on we'll get a punch, and I'll show you what we're going to use that for. Okay, so let's dig into this. The first thing we want to do is just take note of its condition, sort of get thinking about what parts we might want to replace, and what we think is still in good functioning order to leave in here. I'm imagining drags are a good first thing right off the bat. The reel did still have some drag tension left, but I have not seen a whole lot of these drags, the HT100s, that have lasted so many years and still been in good new condition. And they certainly would be fishable, but the question would be for how long, and so that's why I like to replace those. You're also going to need a 5/16 wrench, by the way, or an 8mm, and that will be to remove the side plate bearing right here, which we'll actually go ahead and do since we have it in our hand. Go ahead and get going with this. Zoom out just a touch, and then we will remove this nut. And in here you see this side plate bearing. And again, same procedure going back. We can inspect the insides of these for wear, and we can try to clean that out. We will definitely touch up the chrome on the outside, and we will fill this with some grease. Now, big question that a lot of people ask is about these reels and their labels saying that you put oil. And these are indeed oil fittings for you to take an oil can, something like, not a can, but more like a container that has a spout tip, and you can put it up to these little oiling divots, and the ball will retract in the hole, and as you squeeze your oil will come out of that end. Of course, I can't get it to happen now. I think it's jammed up, but that's the idea. The answer is basically that you can use grease or oil. It's your choice, but I definitely prefer grease on areas like this that are going to be taking some strain under a load. And so we do use oils for the various parts around here for certain types of bearings, and I'll use some heavyweight gear lubes and stuff like that. But really it's your choice. And I also like to put a little bit of grease on the threads going back in as well to help with some weather resistance. So now we're going to remove the worm bearing for this side, and it's just a flathead screw. It was a little tight. And definitely can see that everything in here is just dying for grease. But we're going to fix that. We'll set that to the side. Next, we're going to take our smaller screwdriver and remove these 4 flathead screws on the side plate, and that will release the bridge assembly and really get into the guts of this reel. And while I'm doing this, my fingers are going to be placed just like this, and my thumb on top of the reel, probably from this side, so that I can maintain control over all of those parts while I'm getting the screws out. I'll then extract the screws, and then we will go into the parts inside. They only need 3 or 4 turns before they release from that plate. Alright, now I'm going to extract the screws. I don't want those in the way. This one might need another half a turn or so. There it is. We'll set those to the side. I'm going to set this down in such a way that I can get it back under control. I just do want to take note while we're here that 2 of these screws are different than the other 2. And so 2 are threaded all the way down, while the other 2, sorry about my camera, are smooth for the majority of the screw. And that's because right along this area inside of this plate that we're about to go into, there are 2 springs that ride along these screws. And you can actually look at the screw for wear from the springs, but it's hardly ever a whole lot of wear because it's just scraping pressure sliding up and down that screw. So I'll set these to the side, we'll zoom out, and remember that, you know, if you don't have your fingers on the bottom, that all of this is just going to plop out, and you do need to be careful. What we're going to do is push on the back side just a little bit to give us some clearance, and the reason that we're being so careful is because there are springs in here that will fly across the room, and we're trying to avoid that at all costs. But I'll show you where they're at. Now that we've pushed this out a little bit, we can start to turn it, and as we turn, actually the spring fell down inside the reel, which is better than flying across the room, I've got to say. So as we turn, we'll hold this yoke down, because underneath these holes is where those springs are at, and you can just push on the pinion gear there. And with this still in here, we will push down on the pinion gear, and then we will lift up on this jack and push it off of the eccentric that it's on. If we can get the right angle in here. And it sort of unhooks. It comes out just like that. Now we can let go of our pinion gear and the yoke, which reveals the two springs which are down inside. Now this is the spring that you mainly need to be concerned about right here. Looks like this. So this is for the anti-reverse dog, and it's just a flat piece of spring steel, and I'll show you in a little bit where it's typically set, but right now I want to get the rest of this out. Here is the anti-reverse dog itself, which rides one of those screws and has the spring behind it. We'll set that aside. We can then also extract these springs here, and then we can pull this whole assembly out, but I'm actually going to turn it this way and lift the side plate off of it, because inside of here are your drag washers. And before we break this down, we're going to go a little bit further into the side plate, so I'm going to set that aside. Alright, now we're going to remove the eccentric for the jack and the eccentric lever. And so for that we'll need flat head. You'll see me kind of use my thumb underneath the screw so that I can set the screwdriver on my thumb and sort of guide it into the slot. These flathead screws, you know, of course they were used in everything back in the day, but I'm thankful that a lot of these have been switched out for different types of screw heads now. I am holding from the back side, well, and that's why you want to hold everything. I was going to tell you to hold the back side of this eccentric because there is a spring loaded behind it and it is under a little bit of tension, and you don't want to lose that. The lever and the screw pops off just like that though from this side. And what we'll do is we'll push a little bit on this side of the eccentric and just maintain control over the top so that spring can't go anywhere. And then I will lift the eccentric from the side plate using some angled tweezers that I can just use with a little bit of prying pressure. There it is. And then we can just remove this spring from the eccentric because it's just a little hook, it just drops out the bottom. Alright, and that is the side plate on this side. You can see there's another oiler fitting here. And so what we'll do is we will work these and sort of send some lubricant down inside there to help control some rust and make sure that these aren't actually leaking, because the thing I don't like about these at all is the fact that they can let water in over time if they don't stay lubricated. When parts decline after you've used them for so long, it's just what happens. But it's the nature of the beast. Okay, so now we have here our main gear and gear sleeve and the bridge assembly and the anti-reverse gear on the bottom of that. There's some washers underneath. There are drag washers inside of the gear itself. We're going to try to get those out just by sort of tapping. We get one. Well, we're going to have to do some work and get these out. Go in with my little flat bar here. It's pretty sharp on the tip. I'm able to slide that underneath and separate it from the gear. Well, what you can actually do is just pull the entire gear off the gear sleeve, and it extracts everything at one time. Then you can go in here and remove them from the inside. A good rule of thumb when you're doing any type of drag setup is to lay your washers out in the order that they came out of the gear or wherever they're housed. That's just to, you know, keep them in order for reassembly. And you'll see that these are sort of Look at that. That drag washer obviously is not in the best shape, so this will need some new drag. But you notice that they go from a drag washer to a friction washer, and then a drag washer to an eared washer. And so what's happening here is that as this gear turns, the very bottom washer will create friction against the bottom of this gear. And then the next washer on top of it is slotted on the inside, and so is the gear sleeve. So it's flat on two sides. And as this turns, the bottom one turns, the friction washer will not turn, but the next washer will turn on top of it. As you are pulling drag, if there's drag being pulled, the eared washer stays keyed to the main gear at all times through these little slots on the side of the inside of the gear. And then the next washer, the next drag washer, will create friction on top of that one. And then this one repeats the process a third time with a slotted washer, which stays stagnant to the gear post itself, because the gear post again has those flat sides on it. So in total there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these, and the top one is just a little friction washer for the top. There's also a small washer on the bottom here, but I'm afraid that when I get it off that it's going to break on me as well. So I'm actually going to leave this here for now. I'm just going to lubricate this very well when we go back and reassemble. But there's one more thing we can do that, you know, most times if you're just servicing this reel, you're never going to do it. And I'll show you what the last step for this is. There's a little hole right here. If I can get my camera to focus. Right there. And there's actually a pin inside of there that holds this gear sleeve together. And so what we're going to do is actually punch that pin out of there with a very, very small punch. So I'm going to get set up for that, and then we'll continue. Okay guys, here we have the main gear post and bridge assembly on the vise. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove this pin right here. I don't know if you can see it, it's right below my finger. There's a little hole just behind those threads. In fact, I will point it out to you. It's right here. That's where it's at. So this punch is going to go right in this hole, and I'm going to tap it with the hammer and drive that pin out, and that will help us to remove that gear post. Well, the gear sleeve, they call it. This is a punch that I actually made for this purpose. I'm not sure the exact size on it, but you will have to have a very, very small punch to clear that pin out of there. So let me get set up one more time, and then we'll go ahead and do it. Alright guys, I'm going to try to drive this from the back side so that maybe you can see what's going on. Alright, pin found. Let's give her a few taps. Alright. And as you can see, that pin has come most of the way out. I'm going to get some needle nose pliers. The closest pliers I can find. Just going to grab a hold of it and pull it out. Well, get my thing set up here first. There it is. Right there, little pin. We'll put this on the bench and we'll remove the gear sleeve. Alright, so we have our pin and our gear sleeve. Pin has been removed from the hole, and this should just pull off. In this case, it does not. I'm going to spin some of this coil down in there. You probably saw that I had already applied some before I tried to extract that pin on the vise, because these things do like to get stuck on here, especially over time. There it is. And so what you have here is the sleeve, which is mostly smooth all the way through. It looks like it does have some threads on the inside for that end piece, the nut for the handle. This, however, has some channels on it, to hold grease, to sort of act as a cooling agent for this shaft as it's spinning and taking large amounts of lateral wear from the main gear. But that's how you remove that. We're going to be very gentle with this here and just sort of clean it up best we can. There's quite a bit of wear on it. Of course, we will take a look and just see if there's any abnormal types of wear or anything that would cause to take away from the fishability of the reel. But at this point, it doesn't look like that there is. So we will continue on. So that concludes the disassembly and breakdown of the Penn Peerless 109. We have all the parts here, and we are now ready to officially begin the cleaning stage of all these parts. And that's going to include shining up every piece of metal from the drag washers to the gears to the other linkages and parts inside the gearbox to the plastic side plates and making them shiny again. And I'll show you how to do all this, as well as the resin on the handle and a couple of cosmetic things like this click tongue that's not removable, that's covered in rust. We're going to try to do something about that too. As always, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and please comment and let me know what you'd like to see next.